Hi there, I'm Marcus, and this is a recording of the first Verbal Reasoning online tutoring session on Nagwa Classes. Verbal Reasoning is one of the 4 subjects commonly assessed in the 11+, and tests students' ability to spot patterns with letters and numbers, crack codes, and analyse words and text to solve problems. In this session, we discussed 3 different question types that commonly come up in the verbal reasoning exam. So please enjoy this video and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this. So hello everyone, welcome to this course on the verbal reasoning part of the 11+ exam. And over the next 8 sessions, we're going to have a look at and work through and solve some of the different question types that we might encounter in this part of the 11+ exam. So let's start by having a look through what verbal reasoning is, what this part of the exam is. And verbal reasoning is about using logic to solve problems involving words, letters, and funny enough, even a small amount of maths. And some of the things you might be expected to do are finding patterns. So, for example, you might be given 2 words that are in some way linked. You have to spot what this pattern is and then apply it to a brand new word in exactly the same way. There might also be having to complete sentences. And again, these sentences might be spotting relationships or spotting patterns between words in the sentences or continuing series. So, you might have something as simple as you start with a word, and as we progress through a series or through a sequence, you will notice that something is gradually changing, and then you have to find out what's going on in the next one. So in this example, we're losing 1 letter each time. So the next answer would be just the letter S, for example. And we've also got some different kinds of questions that involve you having to substitute numbers for letters, letters for numbers, and even crack codes. So, for example, we might be told that the code word for ear is 1, 2, 3. And then we have to determine what the code is for the word R. And again, using some logic, some reasoning, spotting what the patterns are, spotting similarities, then we can easily determine that the answer to this one would be 2, 3, 1. Now, one of the real challenges of the 11+ is not just being able to understand what the question is asking of you and solve it, but also to do it in an efficient and as quick way as you can. And so throughout these sessions, we're not only going to be learning about the different question types you might encounter and how to go about solving them, but doing so in the quickest way possible. In your actual exam, you might have as little as 30 seconds to answer each question. So, best way to learn how to do these quickly is to just keep practicing them. And so in this session, we're going to go through 3 different question types that you might commonly encounter in your 11+ exam. So the first one we're going to look at is letter relocation. Now, in letter relocation, we're given 2 words. So we might be given word 1 and word 2. And what we have to do is move one single letter from word 1 into word 2. And by doing this, we will create 2 brand new words. So we will create word 3 and word 4. But most importantly, we cannot rearrange any of the letters. So we can insert a letter from word 1 anywhere we want into word 2, but we cannot change the order that the letters are already in. So I think the best way to understand this a bit more is to have a look at a typical question and have a go at working through it. So I will read the question out to start with, and this again is the kind of typical wording you might see. So move 1 letter from the first word and add it to the second word to make 2 new words. You may not rearrange the other letters, and both new words must make sense. So what I'm going to do now is, you should see where your chat box is. You now have the option to choose one of the different answers given to you. So I'll give you a little bit of time, have a think, select what you think the answer might be, and then we can work through it together. I'll just give everyone a few more moments to have a go. Okay, great. So everyone has gone for answer B, which is R. So let's have a look at how you would go through answering this type of question. So the easiest way is actually to only consider the first word to start with. Go through each letter in the word, and if we remove it, can we create a brand new word that makes sense? So we're starting off with the word break. So let's go through each letter in this word. Let's remove it and see whether we are left with a word that makes sense. So if we remove the letter B from break, we create the word reek or react, which, is not a word that makes sense. It might sound like reek, but the proper spelling of the word reek is different to this. So we can sort of already see that the answer probably isn't going to be B. Okay, if we remove the letter R, then we're left with this word, beak. Okay, that is a word that makes sense. So R might well be the letter that we need to move from the first word into the second word. But let's go through the other three and see whether there could be any others. So if we remove the letter E, then we create the word brack. Now this sounds like it might be a word that makes sense, but it's not. There's no sort of commonly used word called brack. Similarly, we can remove A and we're left with breck, which is also not a word that makes sense. And then finally, we can remove K and we're left with breya or bria, which again isn't a word that makes sense. So already we can probably tell that the correct answer to this might be R, because it's the only word we can remove that gives us a word that makes sense. And in your actual exam, if you reach this point, you might well say, right, I'm pretty sure the answers are. I'm going to mark that and move on to the next question. But as this is the first one we've looked at together, let's just check whether we can put R into the second word and create a new word. So we're going to start with the word office. And the quickest way to check whether you can make a new word is to put the letter at the very start or at the very end. And then if it doesn't work, then we have to start worrying about whether they can go somewhere in the middle. But if we start by putting R at the start of the word, then we make the word roffice, which, sounds like a fun word, but isn't a word that makes sense. So, okay, it doesn't go at the start of the letter. What about if we were to put it at the end of the word? Well, if we were to put the R here, we would make the word officer. Now, that is a word that makes sense. An officer is a word. So we can probably say with certainty now that the correct answer is B, R. So well done to everyone who got that. Okay, so now we've had a look at one of these questions. We've sort of been through how they work and looked at how you might go about solving it. Let's have a go at another one. So I'm not going to read the question out this time, but I am going to give you the chance to have a go at answering it. So have a go at this and we'll go through it in a few moments' time. Okay, so we've got a couple of answers in already. I'll give you a little longer in case anyone else wants to have a go. Okay, let's stop it there. Time's up. So everyone has gone for E, the letter T. So let's approach this in exactly the same way as we did with the previous question. So we're going to start with the word plant. And let's go through, remove each letter and see whether we're left with a word that makes sense. So if we were to remove the letter P, we would make lant, which isn't a word that makes sense. So we can probably be fairly confident that P isn't the answer. What about if we remove the al from the word plant? Well, we make the word pant. Now that is a word that makes sense. So we might well, al might well be the letter that we move to make two new words. So let's just put a little star there to make a note of that. Okay, what about if we were to remove the letter A? Well then, without any vowels in this word, we create this rather sort of ugly looking word, plunt or plunt, which is difficult to say and is also not a word that makes sense. So we can discount A as being the correct answer. What about if we remove the word, the letter N? So if we remove the letter N, we create the word plat. Now, plat does sound like a word that makes sense, but if we're talking about plat in terms of maybe bread or hair, it's not actually spelt in that way. So plat, P-L-A-T, is not a word that makes sense. So the answer is not going to be N. Okay, and finally, let's remove letter T, which is what most of you thought the answer was. So if we remove the letter T, we create the word plan. Now that is a word that makes sense. So in this particular question, we've removed one letter, each letter from the first word, and we've determined that we can move either the letter al or the letter T to create a new word that makes sense. Okay, so at this point, we can't just say, well, it must be this letter and move on to the next question. We now need to consider whether we can put the al or the T into the word rust to create a brand new word. So again, let's do a similar approach to last time. And the easiest way to look at this is to start by putting the letter at the very beginning of the second word and at the very end of the second word, and to see whether we create a new word. So if we start with the letter L, we can either make the word lust, which quite clearly doesn't make sense. Okay, what about if we put it at the end of the word? Well, we make rustle or rustle. Now, rustle, again, might sound like it's a correct word, but it's not spelt in this way. And so it looks like, actually, al is not the letter we want to move from the first word to the second word. But again, let's just double check this and have a look at whether we can put the letter T somewhere. So if we put T at the very start of the word, we create the word trust. Now that is a word that makes sense. So I think, we might have confirmed our answer here. And again, just for completeness, if I was to put T at the end of the word, well, we would just make the word rust again with a double T on, rusted, which, doesn't make sense at all. So, well done to everyone who said T. This is indeed the correct answer. And again, we could have easily stopped after we had discounted the letter L, or as soon as we had found that we could make the word trust. And this is the kind of sort of efficiency and quick way to work through your 11 plus exam to try and get these questions answered within 30 seconds. The questions we've seen so far have been, fairly straightforward, but here are some little tips and tricks to look out for when you are trying to do these questions. So as we've already seen, one of the best ways to start is to take your first word and remove each of the letters and see whether you form a word that makes sense. This is a quick way of being able to discount some of the letters. And if you're very lucky, maybe you discount 4 of them and you're left with 1, which must be the answer. But even so, only having to consider 2 letters when looking at the second word is a lot more efficient, a lot easier to deal with than having to consider all 5 letters. So this is the best possible way to start. We can then try any of the words any of the letters that do create a new word when they're removed in the second word in all possible positions. So if I just write, so the quickest way to see if you can make a new word is to try the letter at the start of the word and at the end of the word. Because this is really easy to visually see, does that look like a word that makes sense? If it doesn't, and it's a little bit more of a complicated or a little bit more of a difficult question, then you might have to start considering, can I put this letter in between each of the other letters to create a new word? And remember, we cannot change the order of this word. So we must always have the letters W, O, R, and D in that specific order. We can put our new letter anywhere in between them, at the start or at the end. But what we're not allowed to do is to say, well, actually, I'm going to rewrite it like that. You can't do that. So with this in mind, let's have a go at one more question that's a little bit more difficult. So I'll give you a little bit more time to think about this. Have a go, and we'll work through the answer in a few moments' time. Okay, we've got some answers coming in. We've got a couple of people who are agreeing with each other. I'll give everyone a few more moments in case we have any latecomers who want to vote. Fantastic. So we've got a couple of different answers here. Okay, so let's have a look at what the answer to this is. So some people think the answer is A, the letter B, and some people think the answer is B, letter R. So let's take the exact same approach we had last time. Let's go through each letter in the first word, remove it, and see if we can create a new word that makes sense. So if we take the word brain, if we remove the B, we create the word rain. Now that is a word that makes sense. So B might well be one of the letters we will be moving. Okay, if we remove the letter R, then we create the word bane. And again, you might have heard of the word bane, but it's not spelt in this way. That's spelt B-A-N-E. Bane, spelt B-A-I-N, is not a word that makes sense. So we can quickly discount the letter R. Okay, let's go to our next letter. So if we remove the A, we create the word Bryn. And that is also not a word that makes sense. So we can discount the letter A as being the correct answer. And then if we remove the letter I, we create the word Bran. Now that is a new word that makes sense. So Bran, so the letter I, might well be the correct answer as well. And finally, if we remove the letter N, then we form this word bray or bry, which doesn't make sense either. So the answer is unlikely to be N. So like in the previous question, we've actually got two possible letters that we could move from the first word into the second word. We've got B and we've got I. Okay, so let's see if we can put any of these into the second word to create a new word. So as we did before, let's try putting the letter B at the start of the word. And that makes this sort of word, brute, which, again, you might have heard of the word brute, but it's not spelt that way. The word brute, B-R-O-O-T, isn't a word that makes sense. Okay, what about if we put it at the end of the word? Well, then we create this word that already doesn't look like it makes sense, and certainly I wouldn't quite know how you would say this. So I think we can be sort of pretty certain the B doesn't go at the end of the word. Okay, let's quickly try with the letter I then. So if we put I at the start of the word, we make irute or I-root, which might sound like some kind of fancy product, but it's not a word that makes sense. So it can't go there. Okay, what about if we put it at the end of the word? Well, we've made the word rootai or rooty, but again, that is not a word that makes sense. So we tried putting the letter B and the letter I at the end and the beginning of the word, and we haven't created a new word. So this one's a little bit more difficult because we're going to have to put this letter somewhere in the middle of the word root to try and create a new word. And we can already see that the word root has two O's in it. And so quite quickly we can see that, well, wherever we put the letter I, we're going to create some really odd looking words. So, if we put it between the R and the first O, we would make this. If we put it between the two O's, we would make this. And if we put it between the O and the T, we would make this. And none of these look like words that make sense at all. Okay, what about if we do the same with B? Well, if we put the B directly after the R, we get reboot. Close, but again, not a word that makes sense. Okay, what about if we put it in between the two O's? We've made the word robot. Now, that is a word that makes sense. And so at this point, we can probably confirm that the correct answer is indeed answer option A, the letter B. And we can stop there and move to the next question. But just for completeness, let's just show that if we were to put the B after the two O's, we would create this, which isn't a word. So that was a little bit more difficult. We could quite quickly eliminate three of the letter choices by removing them from the first word to see whether we had a word that makes sense. But it was a lot more difficult to figure out where we could put that removed letter into the second word to create a new word. And in this case, it went right in the middle of the word root to create the word robot. Okay, let's now have a look at a different type of question you might encounter. So in this question type, you're given a series of letter pairs, and this might be 4, 5, 6. So you might be given a series of letter pairs. So it could be something like this, for example. And what we have to work out is how each letter in the pair are connected to each other. What's the relationship between them? And then once we figure that out, we then need to determine what the next letter pair in the sequence is. And luckily, to help you out, hopefully you may well be given an alphabet within the question itself. But if you're not, I would strongly suggest to quickly write one out, because this can make spotting the patterns a lot more easier. So let's have a look at one and have a go. So again, I'll read the first question out to you, and then I'll give you a go to work through it and let me know what you think your answer is. So the alphabet is here to help you with this question. Find the next pair of letters in the series: AX, BY, CX, DW. What's the next letter pair? So I'll give you a few moments to have a think, have a go, use the alphabet to help you, and we'll go through this in a few moments. Okay, so I've got a few answers in already. I'll just give it a few more seconds, and then we will have a look at how to go about solving this and what the correct answer is. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So all of you think the answer is B, the letter pair EV. Okay, so let's have a look at how we would go about solving this. So what we want to look at is how the first letter in each pair is related. Once we've figured that out, we can then determine what the first letter in the next pair is. We can then do the same with the second letter of each pair and work out what the second letter in the series will be. So if we take the first letter in this series, we've got A, B, C, D. Now, we can probably see just by looking at this what the pattern is. But just to confirm this, let's have a look at the alphabet at the top here. And you can see that in this series, we're going forward along the alphabet by one each time. So we're going from A to B, B to C, C to D. So we are going along the alphabet by +1 each time. And therefore, the first letter in the next pair in the series will be, we start at D and we move forward along the alphabet by one letter. So we will start with the letter E. Okay, now let's have a look at the second letter in this series. So we start with Z, we then have Y, we have X, and we have W. And again, this might be quite obvious just by inspection, but let's have a look at the alphabet to confirm this. So we start at Z, and you can see to get to Y, we move backwards through the alphabet by one letter. And then to go from Y to X, we go backwards by one letter again. And from X to W, we also go backwards by one letter. So we are moving back through the alphabet by one letter each time. So if we start at W and move back one letter, we get to the letter V. And so our next letter pair in the series will be EV. So well done to everyone who said EV. You got that right. Now, this was a nice, simple one, but hopefully you can understand how the best way to solve this is to use your alphabet. Take the first letter in each pair, determine what the relationship is between them, and then apply that to find what the next letter pair is. Okay, I'm going to give you another one to have a go at. Let's see how you get on with this one. So I'll give you a few moments. Again, use your alphabet. Look what's going on between the first letter in each pair, and then look at what's going on between the second letter in each pair, and see if you can work out what the next pair of letters in the series is. Okay, I've got some answers in. I'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, great. Time's up. Let's see what you've put. So all of you think the answer is JS. Okay, so let's go through this in exactly the same way we did before and see if we can figure out what the next letter in the series is. So the first letter in each letter pair, which is actually quite straightforward. We go from J to J to J to J. So we don't even need to actually use our alphabet to help us here. We can see that actually the first letter in each pair along the series does not change at all. And so the next letter, the first letter in the next pair is also likely to be the letter J. So we could also think of this as, sort of shifting by a value of 0 as well. But we can see just from inspection that it's quite obvious that the next letter is always going to be J. Okay, so that was quite an easy one. Let's have a look at the second letter in each pair. So we're going from K to M to O to Q. So let's see how this works on our alphabet. So we're starting at K. In order to get to M, we go forward by 2 letters. So we've shifted forward along the alphabet by 2 letters. Okay, what about to get from M to O? Well, again, if we start at M, we can see we go 1, 2 letters to get to O. So we've also shifted forward through the alphabet by 2 letters. And finally, to get from O to Q, again, 1, 2, we've shifted forward through the alphabet by 2 letters. So in order to find the second letter in the next pair, we are going to start at Q and move forward through the alphabet by 2 letters. So if we start at Q, and I'll go underneath just to make it clear, we go 1, 2, we get to the letter S. And so if we combine these 2 letters together, we get the next pair of letters in the series as being JS, which is answer option A. So well done to everyone who got that right. Fantastic. So you really seem to understand this type of question and to be able to spot the pattern and then apply it to find the next pair of letters in the series. Some things to look out for in this type of questions, because there will be some more difficult ones and some other little things to be aware of. So you might be able to quickly spot what the pattern is in the given pair. So, for example, where we had one that was, J that was hardly changing, then we can quite clearly see that the first letter is always going to be J. but you might encounter some questions that are not always this obvious. And so doing what we were doing beforehand, where we take the first letter in each pair and then use our alphabet to help us see how each pair is related, is a really, really useful way to spot what the patterns are. Watch out though, because you might get certain questions where the pattern occurs through every other pair. So it might be that you don't have this nice relationship like we have sort of previously. So we might have something like this, where actually when you first look at this, it might look like the pattern is either very, very difficult or there's not a pattern there. But the thing to notice is actually the pattern is occurring for every other pair of letters rather than each neighbouring pair. So what we would do in this particular question is we would find the pattern between these two pairs and then find the pattern between these two pairs and then see that actually the next letter pair in the sequence would be determined by this pair and this pair, not these other two pairs. I think the other really important thing to be aware of is often we will loop around the alphabet. So, for example, we might have the end of our alphabet like this. Oh, if you can do your alphabet correctly. But you might get to a pattern that requires you to move forward from Z. Well, in that case, we just loop back around the alphabet and start again at A. So if you're looking at a pattern that seems to get to the lower end of the alphabet, the end of the alphabet, and you're not quite sure where to go next, treat it like a loop and go straight back to the letter A after you've passed by the letter Z. And this also works if we're going backwards through the alphabet. So if the pattern is we move backwards through the alphabet and you're approaching the letters A, B, C, D, and you're not quite sure how do I move backwards past A, you then loop back round and go back and to Z and then work through the alphabet again. Okay, so let's have a go at a slightly more trickier letter series question and see how you do with this one. I'll give you a little bit longer to have a go at this one, because it's a little bit more tricky, and then we'll have a look at this and see what the correct answer is. Okay, we've got one answer in so far. As I said, this is a little bit more tricky, so I'm going to give you a little bit more time just to see if you can figure out what the relationship is, what the pattern is, and then apply it to find the next pair of letters in the series. Okay, we've got a couple of answers now. A few more seconds, and then we'll have a look at this one. Okay, time's up there, and everyone has gone for the next pair of letters being LW. So let's have a look at this question. So we're going to approach this in exactly the same way as we did before. We're going to take the first letter in each pair and see what the relationship is between them. So we're going to start with the letter B, which is followed by C, E, and H. So let's use our alphabet again to help us and see what's going on. So to get from B to C, we shift forward through the alphabet by one letter. So we've gone forward by one letter. Okay, But this time, to get from C to E, we actually go forward through the alphabet by 2 letters. So instead of going forward by 1, we've gone forward by 2. Okay, so if we now start at the letter E, how do we get to the letter H? Well, we go forward to the alphabet by 1, 2, 3 letters. And so we shift forward through the alphabet by 3 letters. Now we can see a pattern emerging here. We don't move by the same amount between the first letter in each pair. What we actually do is we move by 1 additional letter each time. So between the first and the second letter pair, we've gone forward by 1. Between the second and third letter pair, we've moved forward by 2. And then between the third and the fourth, we've moved forward by 3. So if we want to continue this pattern, then we are going to move forward from the letter H by 4 letters. So if we start at the letter H and go forward through the alphabet by 4 letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, we arrive at the letter L. So this is a little different to what we've seen before. Normally, we either had the letters moving by the same amount each time, sometimes forwards, sometimes backwards, or not moving at all. But in this one, we've actually got them moving forward, but by a different amount each time, but we can still spot a pattern with how much they move forward. Okay, now let's have a look at the second letter in each letter pair. So we go from M to Q to T to V. And once again, let's use our alphabet to see what's going on. So if we're starting at M, to get to Q, we shift forward through the alphabet 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've gone forward through the alphabet by 4 letters. Okay, what about to get from Q to T? Well, if we start at Q, to get to T, we go forward through the alphabet 1, 2, 3 places. So we've gone forward by +3. I wonder if you can see the pattern that's emerging. So let's see how we get from T to V. So we start at T, and again, we're going forward through the alphabet by 1, 2 letters this time. So we've gone forward by 2 letters. So in this particular pattern, we are moving forward through the alphabet, but decreasing the amount we move forward by 1 each time. So we've moved forward by 4, then by 3, and then by 2. So we can see that the next letter, we will start at V and move forward through the alphabet by 1 letter. And so if we start at V and move forward through the alphabet by 1, we get to the letter W. And so if we combine the 2 letters together, we form the next pair of letters in the series as LW, which is answer option E. So well done to all of you who said that. This is fantastic. You've all done really, really well with these questions. And I think you've really understood them and hopefully seen the kind of patterns that might occur in these questions and the importance of using your alphabet to help you quickly and surely see what's going on. Okay, now let's have a look at our third and final question type in this particular session. So this one is quite similar to the letter series we were just looking at, but instead of being given a series of pairs of letters, we're only given 2 pairs of letters. So we might be given a sentence that says that, these 2 pairs of letters are related to these pair of letters. And then we need to apply that exact same relationship to a third pair of letters. So these are related in some way. We then need to figure out how we can apply that relationship to a second pair of letters to determine what that relationship is. And again, in these questions, you will typically be given the alphabet to help you. And so you'll see that these are very similar to the letter series questions we've just done, but in some ways, perhaps a little simpler because we haven't got to spot the pattern between 3, 4, 5, 6 pairs of letters, only between 2 pairs. So the best way to see this in action is to actually have a go at a question yourselves. So I'll read the question to you and then I'll let you have a go at answering it and then we can work through this. So the alphabet is here to help you with this question. Find the letter pair that best completes the sentence. JL is to MO as UW is to what? So have a go, see what you think the answer is, and then we'll work through this in a few moments' time. Fantastic. So we've got a few answers coming in now. I'll just give everyone a few more seconds to have a go. And then we'll look at how to tackle this type of question. Okay, right. Time's up there. And you've all gone for the letter pair X, Z. So let's have a look at how we solve this type of question. So I think the first thing, just to clarify, is we have this weird wording in this sentence. So we have JL is to MO as UW is to. Now that can sound a little bit sort of strange. What does that mean? Well, this is just a more verbal way of just saying there is some relationship between the pairs of letters JL and MO. Once we find how these two are related, then we want to know how we can apply that relationship to the letter pair UW. And again, in the same way for the previous type of question, the best way was to look at the first letter in each pair and find the relationship. We can do exactly the same thing here. So let's break it down letter pair at a time. So we are told that JL is to MO. So the first letter is J, and of the first letter of the first pair is J, and the first letter of the second pair is M. Okay, and then the second letter of the first pair is L, and the second letter of the second pair is O. So what we need to determine is what is the relationship between J and M, and what is the relationship between L and O. Once we've figured that out, then we can apply the exact same one to U to figure out what the first letter of the missing letter pair is, and then we can apply the same relationship for the second letter in the first pair of letters to W to find out what the missing letter is there. And yet again, our alphabet is really, really useful here. So if I start at the letter J, how do I get to the letter M? Well, I go forward through the alphabet 1, 2, 3 places. So to get from J to M, I've gone forward through the alphabet by 3 letters. Okay, Let's now have a look at the second letter in the first pairs of letters we're given. So how do we get from the letter L to the letter O? Well, again, if we start at the letter L, we go forward through the alphabet 1, 2, 3 places. And so we've shifted through the alphabet by 3. So now we know how JL is related to MO. In both cases, we go forward through the alphabet by 3 letters. We can now apply this exact same relationship to UW. So if we start at the letter U and shift forward through the alphabet by 3, we go 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we can now fill in this with the letter X. Okay, now let's do the exact same thing with starting with the letter W. So we start with the letter W and we're going to move forward through the alphabet by 3 letters. So start letter W, 1, 2, 3. We get to the letter Z. So if we start at W and move forward 3 places, we get to the letter Z. And so combining these two together, we get the letter pair that best completes the sentence to be XZ, which is the answer option everyone went for. So fantastic. Well done, everyone. Okay, so now you've got an understanding of how this type of question works, how to sort of understand the question itself and how to solve it. Let's have a go at another one. So I won't read the question out this time, because we've already seen one, but take everything we did in the previous question and have a go at answering this one. So I'll give you a few moments to have a go at this one. Okay, we've got a couple of answers coming in. Just give it a few more seconds to see if anyone else wants to offer an answer. Okay, let's stop there and have a look at this question. So again, let's apply exactly the same process we used in the previous question. So we need to figure out how H and M is related to G and N. Once we've figured that out, then we can apply that relationship to the letter pair PU. So let's write out what our letters are. So we've got H is somehow related to G, and M is somehow related to N. Once we've determined this, then we can apply that to the letter P to work out what the first letter in the missing letter pair is. And then we can also apply the same relationship between M and N to the letter U to figure out what the second letter in the missing pair of letters is. So going back to our trusted alphabet, we can see that if we start at H, in order to get to the letter G, this time we're moving backwards through the alphabet by 1 letter. So like that. So we've actually gone backwards by 1 letter through the alphabet. Okay, what about to get from M to N? Well, if I start at the letter M, to get to N, I move forward through the alphabet by 1 letter. So in this occasion, I've gone plus 1 letter forward through the alphabet. Okay, so we've now figured out the relationship between H and G and between M and N. We can now apply this to the letter pair PU to determine what our missing letter pair is. So we're going to start at the letter P, and we can see that we need to move backwards through the alphabet by one letter. So moving backwards one letter from P, we get to the letter O. So we can put that in there like that. Okay, now what we're going to do with U? Well, to get from M to N, we move forward through the alphabet by one. So we're going to start at U and also move forward through the alphabet by one letter. And we get to the letter V. And so putting these two together, we get the letter pair that best completes the sentence to be OV, which is answer option B, which I forgot to make a note of, but I'm pretty sure that's what you all went for. So well done, everyone there. Again, similarly to the letter series, there's a few other little things just to be aware of. In some ways, this question is slightly easier than letter series because with something like letter series, we have quite a long series of letters that we have to figure out the pattern for. But for letter relationship, we are only given two pairs, and we just have to apply that same relationship to the next pair of letters. And so this just makes it a little easier to deal with. There's not going to be the sort of pattern we saw in letter series where your, how you shift to the alphabet might decrease by one each time or increase by one each time. You're going to have a very static, the same relationship between the first pair of letters, and then you just need to apply that to the second pair. So this is a nice, much more sort of simplified version of letter series. But let's have a go at one final question for this particular question type. So have a go at answering this one, and we will go through it shortly. So we've had a bit of a think about this one, a little bit longer. We've got a couple of answers coming in. So I will just give everyone a few more moments to have a think about this, and then we can go through it. Okay, let's stop there. Thank you, everyone. So everyone thinks the answer is the letter pair NT. So let's have a look. So we're going to go through this in the same way as before. So we know that there is a relationship between the first letter in the given pair, so E to D. And then there's also a relationship between the letters F and H. Once we've determined this, then we will apply the exact same relationship to the letters O and the letters R. Oh, and I've got a little bit, no, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so again, we've got our alphabet to help us. So how do we get from E to D? Well, very simply, if we start at E, we move backwards through the alphabet by one letter. So to get from E to D, we go backwards one letter. Okay, what about F to H? Well, again, if we start at the letter F, to get to the letter H, we shift forward through the alphabet by 2 letters. Okay, and again, this is important to note that they might not always shift in the same direction, or they might not always shift by the same amount. So in this particular question, the first letter in each pair is actually shifting backwards by 1, but the second letter in each pair is actually shifting forwards through the alphabet by 2. So now we know how EF is related to DH. Let's apply the same relationship to the letter pair OR. So we are going to start at the letter O and we are going to move backwards by 1 letter. So like this. We've moved backwards by 1 letter and we get to the letter N. Okay, great. Now let's have a look at what we're going to do with the letter R. Well, to get from F to H, we move forward through the alphabet by 2. So we're going to do the same starting from letter R. So if we move forward through the alphabet by 2, 1, 2, we get to the letter T. And so combining these two together gives us our letter pair that best completes the sentence to be NT, which is what you all went for. So well done, everyone. I feel like you've really sort of understood this question type and you've all been fantastic in answering it correctly. So well done, everyone. Okay, so we've reached towards the end of the session now. Let's have a quick look at what we've been through. So we've looked at 3 different question types in this particular session. The first was letter relocation, where we have to move 1 letter from the first word to somewhere on the second word to create 2 new words. So in the one question we looked at, we could remove the letter R from break to make the word beak and put it in the word office to make the word officer. And we had a go at those and everyone seemed fairly good at that. The next question type we looked at were letter series, and this is where we are given a series of letter pairs. We have to determine how each pair is related and then apply that to find what the next letter in the series is. And again, we looked at this nice one where the first letter in each pair doesn't change, so it's J each time, but the second letter moves forward through the alphabet by 2 each time. And so if we continue this, we get the next pair of letters being JS. And then finally, we looked at a very similar question type, letter relationship. And this is where we are given 2 pairs of letters. We have to figure out what the relationship is between the first pairs of letters and then apply that to a new pair in order to determine what the missing pair is. And so again, we figure out how F is related to G in this example, how I is related to H, and then we do the exact same relationship to get from R to S and from U to T. Okay, fantastic. So at this point, we've reached the end of the session. So thank you all very much for attending. For those of you who want to have some more practice at these different types of questions, have a go at some more. There is homework that will be available following this session to have a go at, and you'll have until the next session to complete them. So have a go and see how you get on. In addition, if you do wish to message me or to chat with me after the session or in between the next sessions, then we have the chat app available within the Classes app, which you can use to send me a message, and honestly, I will try to respond as quickly as I can. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a great rest of the day, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next session. Bye, everyone.